They do that because every body in a cell is $100. $100 a day. So when you're making that kind of money under the logic of ruthless American capitalism, what you get is, oh, that becomes logical. Putting 100 people in prison because people are getting rich off it. One of the main benefactors of this prison industry is right down the street, Wells Fargo Bank. So we got to stop them because they got plans looking ahead 10 years, 20 years. They got projections. They got plans. They want more people in prison, 7 million. 10 million. In 1970, you had 250,000 people in prison. Today, you have 2.5 million. It's not going to stop. Wells Fargo? Tear it down. Geo Group? Tear it down. PIC? Tear it down. The whole damn system? Tear it down.
I was housed in Rivers Correctional Institution. I can tell you, it's a horror story. The medical treatment is horrible. The food is horrible. There are no programs there for men who are housed there, which means that when a guy comes out of Rivers, he is not prepared to come back to his community to make a positive contribution. That's why we must build a movement consisting of brown people, black people, white people, poor people, and those folks who are concerned about ending mass incarceration, that are concerned about ending the war on drugs, that are concerned about people being locked up for one joint of weed, and that charge will affect them 40 years from now.
I called the Met Police to report a crime, a stolen camera. Next thing I know, I am in Hampton Roads Regional Jail for 5 months and 1 week. It was not a pretty place. There were 1,600 people in 16 different parts. Immigration has got 2 parts that is taken by ICE, who detain people. I didn't even know ICE, something called ICE existed. I've been here 20 years, and I've been in the national capital for 12 years. It's a very interesting place. I love it. A lot of interesting people. But now we have this new attention called this ICE, just looking at the color of your skin or the way you look. They thought I was a terrorist, you know? And they packed me up to Hampton Roads Regional Jail. And no sunlight, like he said. There is like kids locked up there, and a lot of fights on the other side, on the American side, besides the immigration side. And some of them like just underage, like under 17, 16, locked up. Like, it's not a pretty place. I love this country. I've been here 20 years, and I always work, always pay taxes. And why am I any different from others? You know, you can't channelize me. Our Indian contributions to America is immense. 40% of NASA is Indians. Every software that is programmed, that is running on, we are the 2nd largest in the world. That ATM machine that you see in the very beginning, it was Indians who programmed it. And there is a street, every street in America that's got a doctor who's an Indian. I'm a civil engineer myself, and this is very harsh, and it's not a good place to be. And people have to stop this and stop this thing called Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE.
This is a boycott.
Yeah.
This is a boycott. When they boycotted the buses in Birmingham,
yeah,
what did they do? They did not ride the bus. Don't go in Wells Fargo.
Don't go in there.
Go in there to take your money out.
Take it out.
Let the door hit you in the backside, and don't ever come back.
Shut Wells Fargo down. Shut Wells Fargo down.
And they have thousands and thousands of immigration detention beds here in the United States at a time when we go and our schools, they're being told there's no money for our programs, there's no money for sports, there's no money for unemployment insurance, there's no money for people to get food stamps, but yet we're giving taxpayers money to all these corporations to jail people. And not only to jail people, but to jail people that come to this country looking for a better life. And all it ends up being is just a system that sets up people to fail.
It sets out people to work in the shadows so that they don't have any worker rights, so they don't fight for better wages, so they don't fight for better hours. They undercut all the working class, all the black people, brown people, pit them against each other, deport the brown people and put the black people in jail. Fighting this drug war that makes no sense. For 100 years now, this marijuana prohibition has been a punishment, has been a profiteering scheme, and yet we have not yet turned it around. But I know we can, one step at a time. Tell corporations like Wells Fargo that they're not going to get away with it anymore.
Shut it down! Wells Fargo, you're not going to get away with it anymore.
I work with Dorchester tenants, and most of you don't know me, but Dorchester tenants are still where they were 33 years ago. Beautiful. And we wanted to buy our building for $11 million. We got together and we put $11 million on the table, and to make a long story short, they sold it to somebody for $4.9 million.
What?
All right. Money is money. I was on the finance committee and I moved to the legal committee. We filed to challenge their right to sell the building without, make a long story short, we all banded together and our little friends on 16th Street were litigated. One day, they broke down my door, arrested me for representing tenants without a DC license. I said, hey, I have a right to appear. You can effect you want to, and they help me, not for 2 days, but for 39 days.
I'm a nurse in DC, and I just think that you should know at Rivers Correctional Facility, where a lot of our DC prisoners are sent, for years they did not have a doctor at the facility. They had a vet.
Oh my
Our
God!
DC prisoners, when they were able to get treatment, were seeing a veterinarian, not a doctor, not a nurse practitioner. And this is the kind of profit that Wells Fargo is involved in. Don't be confused. It's right here in DC.
As you probably know, the U.S. prison population is now on par with North Korea, China, and other places like that. How do you think we got into this situation in the first place?
Well, I think, man, when you look at mass incarceration, you know, and you look at the environment that a lot of men came out of, man, that are incarcerated. Incarceration does a couple of things. It controls a population. It places those individuals in jail, man, who are less likely to get jobs, you know, which means, man, that you don't have to employ them in the community, you can employ them in prison, you know. And then we look at the war on drugs. You know, we look at the war on drugs that was primarily the war on black men, particularly, and some white folks got caught up in it also. I think Michelle Alexander called them a collaborative evidence or something, you know. And so, you know, we look at a movement that's geared towards locking black men up. Because when you look at movements that have taken place in America, you know, you look at movements that was primarily started by black men, Dr. Martin Luther King, Honorable Marcus Garvey, and a whole lot of other folks who started movements to bring about change in America for humanity. And so primarily the mass incarceration increase in prison is a direct result of the war on drugs.
So do you think there's a partly political motivation behind mass incarceration? Is it to keep?
Well,
is it to keep?
Michelle Alexander says that the war on drugs is a direct result of the war on black men. You have to look at the rebellions that took place in the black communities. You know, folks who were dissatisfied with the conditions that took place in the black community. We began to look at the war on drugs that started really during the Reagan administration. And when we look at the Reagan administration, we're probably talking about maybe around 84 or maybe 88. You know, right after the height of the rebellions, right after the repressive laws that begin to take place, you know, economically, you know, government cutback in terms of employment, you know, etc. So I think that it was to the government's benefit to lock people up instead of giving them jobs, and then you're able to control people. Because in prison, you're able to control the population. If you put drugs in the community, you're able to control that community. When we look at the epidemic of crack in the black community, we look at the guy who was responsible for the Southern Region Drug Task Force, who at that time was President George Bush Sr. You know, and more drugs came into the community or in the country and at any time during the history of the country. And then we move forward, we move fast forward. And we look at the fact, man, that more black men was incarcerated during the Clinton administration than any other president in history of the country. You know, and so all that was a continuation, preparing Clinton to lock folks up. And now we talk about people getting locked up. We talk about mandatory minimum sentencing. We talk about 100 grams of powder cocaine compared to 5 grams of crack cocaine. The folks who were victimized of the war on drugs in terms of crack cocaine were black men particularly in our community. We need to change the whole concept of incarceration, even for violent offenders. You know, we need to change that concept because the concept of incarceration today, man, is not working. Prisons do not work. You ask anybody who's been in prison, they'll tell you, man, that prison was not responsible for them getting their lives together. They were. And so we talk about changing the concept of incarceration, man. We're talking about maybe making transition centers, or rehabilitation centers, you know, centers that will begin to change the mind of a particular individual. Because one of the things we find, man, that a lot of times men go back to prison because they develop this particular mindset. You know, when people commit violence in our community, it's because of the way they're thinking. So we have to change a person's thinking. Incarceration does not do that. Incarceration today, man, is primarily about punishment. It's not about changing the lives of individuals.
What do you think is a good model? Have you identified what a good model is for an alternative, or are you still, is that a question you're still working on?
Well, I would think that a good model, I'm just giving you this off the top of my head because that's not an expertise of mine, but I can talk about my personal experience incarcerated.
Sure.
I think, man, we need a model of a prison that takes the holistic approach to healing an individual. Because one of the things, man, we can say that an individual, man, who's in prison is because of the way he's thinking. You know, he's a sick individual. I'm not talking about sick psychologically, but sick, you understand, in terms of how the system has molded this particular person. You know, and so the model should be, you know, we want to talk about spiritual, we want to talk about psychological, we want to talk about mental, we want to talk about preparing him academically, preparing him culturally, and preparing him with a trade, you know, so that we can make this individual over. You know, and I believe that maybe one of the most successful models that could be developed by those individuals who've been in prison that came out and got their lives together. Because we had a solution. If I did, man, almost 35 years in prison, off and on. I've been in the community now 9 years. That means, man, I learned something. You know what I mean? Not from the prison, but I learned something in terms of how to go within myself, man, to find out why I continue to go to prison and how I'm gonna be able to stay out of prison. So if we bring a committee or something together to develop a model for incarceration, I think we would have the best model. You know, and I think that got to be what people may think about. Like, you know, like a lot of people say, man, well, you know, let's just tear the prison down, release it. But I got some guys, man, I was in the joint with that I wouldn't want to be in the street with because the way they're thinking. A guy who'll kill you for looking at you or for looking at him. You know, we got to change his mind. We got to change the way he's thinking. And once we change his thinking, man, then our community become a lot safer. And then we can begin to show up talk about abolishing prison. Did that do anything for you?
Oh yeah, that was a good answer. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it, man.